The 2019 Ramadan season brought with it many memorable spiritual moments, but one of the recitations that deeply moved listeners around the world was Muhammad Al-Luhaidan's heart-touching recitation of Surah Maryam. His voice, soft yet resonant, powerful yet serene, carried the verses in a way that made many feel as though they were hearing them for the first time. Surah Maryam itself is a chapter filled with divine mercy, miraculous events, and reminders of God's compassion, and in Al-Luhaidan's voice, these meanings come alive with exceptional emotional depth. From the very first verse, his tone carries a sense of reverence. Surah Maryam begins with mysterious, disjointed letters, Kaf Ha Ya, Ain Sad, and Al-Luhaidan delivers them with a delicate control that feels almost contemplative. It gives the listener time to prepare their heart for what will follow, a chapter filled with stories of devotion, miracles, and unwavering faith. The atmosphere created by his recitation is peaceful, yet the intensity within it evokes reflection and humility. As he moves into the story of Prophet Zakariya, the warmth in his voice conveys the sincerity of an elderly prophet turning to his Lord with complete trust. The verses describing Zakariya's quiet, private supplication resonate with listeners because of Al-Luhaidan's emotional emphasis. The plea for a righteous offspring, made despite old age and apparent impossibilities, becomes more than just a historical event, it becomes a reminder of hope and the power of prayer. Many listeners feel their hearts soften as the verses describe how Allah responded to Zakariya with glad tidings of the birth of Prophet Yahya. Al-Luhaidan's recitation brings out both the amazement and the tenderness of this divine response. The transition to the story of Maryam, Mary, the mother of Prophet Isa, Jesus, is one of the most powerful moments in the chapter. Surah Maryam recounts her purity, her devotion, and the miraculous events surrounding the birth of Prophet Isa. Al-Luhaidan's voice captures the fragility, strength, and dignity of Maryam as she withdraws from her people to worship, encounters the angel, and receives the news of a miraculous child. His tonal shifts, gentle during her moments of contemplation and stronger during moments of struggle, mirror the emotional landscape of the narrative. When the verses describe Maryam's labor pains and her retreat to the palm tree, the intensity in Al-Luhaidan's voice makes the listener feel the weight of her trial. Yet the comfort given to her by Allah, through the voice telling her not to grieve, and to find sustenance from dates and water, brings soothing calmness to the recitation. Many listeners describe feeling a spiritual closeness at this moment, as though witnessing divine mercy unfold before them. The moment when the newborn prophet Isa speaks from the cradle is recited with a blend of awe and serenity. Al-Luhaidan's delivery emphasizes the miraculous nature of a baby declaring his prophethood, affirming his mother's chastity, and reminding the people of God's message. The verses become a profound spiritual statement, not merely about one miracle, but about Allah's absolute power to command all things. Throughout the recitation, Al-Luhaidan's mastery of tajwid, rules of recitation, enhances the meanings embedded in the verses. His elongations feel natural and intentional, his pauses allow the listener to absorb the weight of each message, and his transitions between emotional tones reflect a deep understanding of the surah's spiritual layers. Surah Maryam is structured around themes of mercy, family, resilience, and divine decree, and through his voice these themes become almost tangible. As the chapter moves toward its latter verses, warning against disbelief and describing scenes from the Day of Judgment, Al-Luhaidan intensifies his voice. The verses paint vivid images of accountability, consequences, and the ultimate return to Allah. His recitation at this point carries a sense of urgency, urging listeners to reflect on their own lives, their choices, and their spiritual path. Yet even amid the warnings, the surah does not abandon the theme of mercy. Instead, it balances fear with hope, reminding believers that those who remain steadfast and righteous will never be forgotten by their Lord. The closing verses of the surah highlight the truth of the message and reaffirm the importance of following divine guidance. In these final moments, Al-Luhaidan's voice softens once again, offering a sense of closure that is both peaceful and uplifting. The harmony between his vocal control and the Quranic message leaves listeners in a state of calm reflection, gratitude, and renewed spiritual awareness. What makes this recitation particularly memorable is not just the technical excellence but the emotional sincerity with which it is delivered. During Ramadan, when hearts are more open and souls more sensitive, the recitation resonates even more deeply. Many people who listened to this recitation in 2019 still return to it, finding in it a source of comfort, a reminder of divine mercy, and a spiritual anchor during moments of difficulty. In essence, Muhammad Al-Luhaidan's recitation of Surah Maryam is more than a performance, it is an experience. It brings stories of prophets to life, revives the heart with reminders of faith, and conveys the Qur'an's timeless beauty through a voice filled with reverence. For many, this recitation continues to be a cherished spiritual treasure, one that touches the heart every time it is heard. The month of Ramadan has always been a time when the Qur'an resonates more deeply in the hearts of believers. Among the many recitations remembered from recent years, Muhammad Al-Luhaidan's 2019 Ramadan recitation of Surah Maryam stands out as one of the most emotionally stirring. His voice is known for its gentleness and spiritual intensity, but in this particular recitation, something unique comes through, an atmosphere of peace, longing, and reverence that stays with the listener long after the final verse. Surah Maryam is a chapter rich with stories of prophets, miracles, and divine mercy, and Al-Luhaidan delivers each verse with the kind of emotion that makes it feel newly discovered. From the opening verses, his tone is contemplative and steady. The surah begins with the mysterious letters Kaf Ha Ya, Ain Sad, and Al-Luhaidan draws them out softly, giving the listener space to enter a reflective mindset. These disjointed letters have always reminded believers of the miraculous nature of revelation, and in his voice, they feel like a curtain slowly lifting before a sacred narrative. The gentle cadence of his recitation creates a sense of calm, encouraging the listener to open their heart to what follows. The first story in the surah, the story of Prophet Zakariya, is brought to life with an emotional warmth that suits the narrative. Zakariya's supplication is one of humility and hope, and Al-Luhaidan's tone reflects this beautifully. You can hear the yearning of an elderly prophet who longs for a righteous heir, not for personal legacy but to carry forward the remembrance of Allah. Al-Luhaidan's recitation captures the subtle trembling of a devoted servant speaking to his Lord in whispers. His pronunciation, pauses, and breaths add layers of feeling, making listeners sense the vulnerability behind Zakariya's prayer. When the verses transition to Allah's response, announcing the birth of Prophet Yahya, the recitation subtly shifts. The voice becomes brighter, almost celebratory, mirroring the divine miracle. Yahya's birth is described as a mercy and a sign, and Al-Luhaidan delivers these verses with a tenderness that reflects the joy and awe embedded in the story. Many listeners feel their hearts uplifted during these moments, sensing the intimacy between the Creator and his devoted servant. The mood deepens as the surah moves to the story of Maryam, Mary, the mother of Prophet Isa, Jesus. This portion of Surah Maryam is both noble and emotional, and Al-Luhaidan's voice adapts remarkably to the shifting emotions. When Maryam withdraws from her people for worship, his tone becomes quieter and introspective, conveying her devotion, purity, and solitude. As the angel approaches her, the recitation takes on a tone of awe and divine presence. Maryam's fear, confusion, and eventual acceptance of the divine decree are expressed with delicate vocal nuances that make the listener feel the weight of her test. One of the most powerful moments in the recitation is the description of Maryam's labor pains in her retreat beneath the palm tree. Al-Luhaidan's voice becomes heavier, reflecting her struggle, pain, and moments of despair. But as soon as the Qur'an describes the comforting revelation sent to her, that sustenance will come, that she should not grieve, the recitation becomes soothing and warm again. This shift mirrors the message of Allah's compassion, reminding listeners that divine comfort arrives even in the hardest moments. The miraculous speech of the newborn prophet Isa, is another emotional highlight. Al-Luhaidan slows slightly as he recites the baby's words, allowing the listener to feel the full gravity of this miracle. The declaration of prophethood, the reassurance of Maryam's innocence, and the reminder of God's mercy form a powerful message of faith and truth. Al-Luhaidan's solemn and balanced tone during these verses strengthens their impact, making the miracle feel present and vivid. As Surah Maryam progresses, it includes reminders of earlier prophets, Abraham, Moses, Ishmael, and others, each reinforcing the continuity and unity of divine guidance. Al-Luhaidan adapts his voice to emphasize certainty and conviction during these verses. His recitation highlights the dignity of each prophet, the steadfastness of their missions, and the lessons embedded in their lives. These sections remind listeners that faith is a journey shared by generations of believers. In the latter part of the surah, the tone shifts toward warning and accountability. The verses describe the consequences of disbelief, the seriousness of straying from guidance, and scenes from the day of judgment. Al-Luhaidan intensifies his voice, giving these warnings a sense of urgency and gravity. Listeners often find themselves reflecting deeply during this portion, feeling the verses resonate in the depths of their conscience. Yet even here, the Qur'an balances fear with hope. Whenever the surah mentions the righteous, Al-Luhaidan softens his voice again, emphasizing Allah's promise of mercy, reward, and eternal peace. By the time the recitation reaches its final verses, a sense of spiritual completeness settles in. The closing passages affirm the truth of the revelation and the importance of following divine guidance. Al-Luhaidan ends the surah with a gentle, calming tone, leaving the listener with a sense of tranquility and gratitude. What makes this recitation memorable is not only the technical precision but the emotional sincerity behind every verse. Al-Luhaidan's voice becomes an instrument that conveys meaning, emotion, and spirituality. His 2019 Surah Maryam recitation remains beloved because it touches the heart, awakens reflection, and deepens the listener's connection to the Qur'an. For many, it continues to be a source of calm, inspiration, and spiritual renewal. Among the many Quranic recitations shared during Ramadan, some stand out not just for their beauty but for the emotional transformation they create within the listener. One such example is Muhammad Al-Luhaidan's heart-touching recitation of Surah Maryam in Ramadan 2019. His voice, soft, steady, and deeply spiritual, turns the surah into an immersive experience. For those who listened during that blessed month, the recitation became more than a performance, it became a spiritual encounter filled with reflection, gratitude, and awe for the words of Allah. From the opening moments, Al-Luhaidan sets a tone of serenity. Surah Maryam begins with the disjointed letters Kaf Ha Ya, Ain Sad, and his delivery of them feels almost like a spiritual invitation. He extends each letter with measured calmness, creating a peaceful space that prepares the listener's mind and heart for the profound stories that follow. These mysterious letters remind believers of the miraculous nature of the Qur'an, and in his voice, they become a gentle reminder that the coming verses carry deep wisdom. The story of Prophet Zakariya A.S. comes to life with remarkable emotional clarity. Zakariya's quiet and humble supplication reflects a heart full of trust and longing, and Al-Luhaidan captures this perfectly. His voice softens as he recites Zakariya's plea for a child despite old age and frailty. Listeners often feel a sense of closeness to the Prophet in these moments. The vulnerability in his prayer mirrors the vulnerability we all experience when turning to Allah in times of need. When Allah responds with glad tidings of Prophet Yahya A.S., Al-Luhaidan's tone lifts slightly, expressing the wonder and joy of divine mercy. The transition from yearning to fulfillment is beautifully reflected in his recitation, leaving listeners with a sense of hope and comfort. As the narrative shifts to the story of Maryam, Mary, the mother of Prophet Isa A.S., the emotional intensity deepens. Maryam's piety, purity, and devotion shine through the verses, and Al-Luhaidan recites them with an almost reverent tenderness. When Maryam withdraws from her people to worship, his voice becomes reflective, capturing her solitude and spiritual dedication. When the angel appears before her, the recitation grows more intense, mirroring her initial fear and shock. The tonal changes skillfully mirror Maryam's emotional journey, allowing listeners to feel her moments of uncertainty and her steadfast trust in Allah. As Maryam experiences the first signs of pregnancy, the recitation becomes heavier, carrying the emotional weight of her trial. Al-Luhaidan's voice captures both her physical pain and emotional distress, especially as she retreats beneath the palm tree in despair. But the moment divine reassurance arrives, the voice telling her not to grieve, his recitation softens and becomes soothing. The verses depicting the miraculous provision of dates and water are delivered with tranquility, emphasizing Allah's compassion and closeness to his servants. Many listeners feel a wave of peace during this part, as if the recitation itself is offering comfort. The miracle of Prophet Isa A.S. speaking from the cradle is one of the most captivating passages in Surah Maryam, and Al-Luhaidan brings it to life with exquisite control. His voice becomes steady and confident as he recites the newborn's declaration of prophethood, purity, and submission to Allah. These verses hold immense spiritual weight, and the clarity in his delivery allows the listener to fully grasp the wonder of the moment. It is a reminder of Allah's limitless power and the truth of his signs. As the surah continues, it touches on the stories of other prophets, Abraham, Moses, Ishmael, and more, each one reinforcing the continuity of divine guidance. Al-Luhaidan's recitation during these sections becomes firm and deliberate. His voice reflects the strength, patience, and unwavering devotion of the prophets mentioned. These verses remind the listener that throughout history, guidance has always been present for those willing to follow it. Toward the end of the surah, the tone shifts once again, emphasizing accountability and the reality of the Day of Judgment. Al-Luhaidan elevates the intensity of his voice to convey the seriousness of these warnings. His recitation of the scenes describing disbelief, regret, and consequences delivers a powerful message that resonates deeply. Yet, in the midst of these heavy descriptions, The Qur'an also gives glad tidings to the righteous, and Al-Luhaidan beautifully softens his tone in these moments, balancing fear with hope. By the time he reaches the final verses, the recitation feels like it has carried the listener through an emotional and spiritual journey. The closing verses affirm the truth and importance of revelation, and Al-Luhaidan ends with a calm, soothing cadence that leaves a lingering sense of peace. It is the type of ending that gently settles into the heart, inviting silent contemplation. What makes this 2019 recitation unforgettable is not just the technical precision of his tajwid, but the sincerity behind his delivery. Every pause, every elongation, every shift in tone seems aligned with the meaning of the verse. For many, listening to this recitation during Ramadan felt like a moment of spiritual companionship, a reminder of divine mercy, a connection to the stories of the prophets, and a renewal of faith. Muhammad Al-Luhaidan's Surah Maryam recitation remains cherished because it touches the heart in a way that is both gentle and profound. It restores calm, invites reflection, and reminds believers of the beauty of the Qur'an. Even years after Ramadan 2019, this recitation continues to inspire and comfort those who return to it, seeking tranquility, guidance, or simply the sweetness of listening to all his words recited with deep sincerity.